She thought she could control everything, her empire, her image, even her heart. But then he appeared again. The man who saw her not as a billionaire but as a woman he couldn't forget. Their eyes locked, the air between them thick with unspoken confessions and desire they both tried to deny. Tonight, secrets will unravel. Hearts will collide, and nothing, not power, not pride, not fear, can keep them apart. They called her untouchable. Elena Voss, the woman who built an empire from nothing. At 36, she was the face of innovation, the mind behind billion-dollar ideas, and the heart that no one ever truly reached. Her employees feared disappointing her. Her rivals envied her brilliance. But when the meetings ended and the applause faded, she went home to silence. They say perfection has a price, and hers was loneliness. Elena stands before the window, phone in hand, scrolling through messages, none personal. Only numbers, deals, deadlines. For the world, she was the woman who had everything. For herself, she was the woman who had forgotten what it meant to feel. She learned early that feelings make you weak. So she built walls, and then forgot how to open them. But fate has a strange sense of humor, because the night she thought she'd mastered everything, power, wealth, reputation, was the night everything she couldn't control came knocking at her door. Thunder rumbles. Rain lashes against her car windshield. Her driver's gone home early. She's alone. The engine dies. She sighs, annoyed, not afraid. Elena Voss doesn't get stranded. She commands the world to move for her. But tonight, the world didn't listen. Need a hand, ma'am? She turns drenched, startled, and for the first time in years, she has no answer. And just like that, and the woman who never needed anyone met the one man who would make her question everything. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories travel. It feels like our little world of romance and emotion is connected through every heartbeat. And be honest, have you ever loved someone you shouldn't have but couldn't let go of anyway? That kind of love that keeps you up at night, replaying every word, every look. If you have, then you already know the story you're listening to right now. It's your story too. So before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and stay with me till the end, because the next part will make your heart race and your soul whisper, please don't stop, you're getting there. The night was unforgiving. The rain didn't fall, it attacked, slamming against the windshield of Elena Voss's black Aston Martin, as if the heavens themselves were testing her patience. She wasn't supposed to be here, not on this empty highway, not alone. But for once, her schedule had slipped. Her driver had taken the evening off, and Elena, the woman who could control entire markets with a single word, couldn't control a simple thing called fate. The wipers screeched back and forth, fighting a losing battle. The engine coughed once and twice and then died. Complete silence. Elena pressed the ignition again. Nothing. Her heart kicked up in frustration, not fear. She didn't allow herself that luxury. Fear was for the ordinary. And Elena Voss was anything but ordinary. But as the seconds passed, she began to realize no signal on her phone, no passing cars, just the relentless whisper of rain on steel and glass. She was truly alone. A bitter laugh slipped from her lips. Of course, the night I close a billion-dollar deal, the universe gives me this. She reached for the car door, stepping into the cold rain. The wind bit at her cheeks, her coat soaking within seconds. She slammed the hood open, glaring down at the maze of wires and chrome as though sheer willpower could make the car start again. And then, a sound. Footsteps. Measured, calm, coming closer through the rain. Elena stiffened, spinning around. Out of the downpour emerged a man, broad-shouldered, tall, moving with an ease that didn't match the storm. His clothes were soaked, but he didn't seem to care. His expression was unreadable, not the usual polished smile of people who recognized her, nor the nervousness of those who feared her. He just looked steady. "Need a hand?" he asked. His voice was low, deep, the kind that didn't have to be loud to be heard. Elena's instinct flared, her guard always came first. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, brushing wet hair from her face. "I can handle it." He tilted his head slightly, eyes glinting beneath the streetlight. "You sure? Because unless you've got a wrench in that handbag, you're not fixing this one." The corner of his mouth lifted in a small, confident half-smile, not cocky, not mocking, just calm certainty, and for a reason she couldn't explain, that quiet confidence unsettled her. He stepped closer. "I'm Adrian," he said, voice cutting through the rain. "I fix things, mostly engines, sometimes people's bad luck." Elena hesitated. She wasn't used to letting strangers near her, not her life, not her car, not her world. But the way he said it, There was no demand in his tone, no expectation, just a steady offer. "Fine," she muttered finally, moving aside. "Do whatever you can." He gave a brief nod and lifted the hood. Lightning flashed for an instant, his face illuminated, strong jawline, rain dripping from his lashes, focus sharp as steel. He worked in silence, hands moving with effortless confidence. Elena found herself watching him, not because she didn't trust him, but because something about him didn't fit the world she knew. He wasn't rushing to impress her. He wasn't intimidated either. He was just present. Minutes passed. The rain softened to a drizzle. Then he closed the hood and looked at her. "Try it now." Elena slid back into the car, turned the key, the engine purred back to life. She blinked, surprised. "That's impressive." He shrugged. "Just a loose connection. Happens when people think power makes them immune to small things." Her gaze snapped to him. Was that a jab, a tease? But his face held no arrogance, only quiet truth. Something in her chest shifted almost uncomfortably. "Thank you," she said stiffly. He gave a small smile. "You're welcome." Then, as if realizing the moment had already lasted long enough, he took a step back. "Don't drive alone next time," he said simply. "Even machines have limits." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, no exchange of names, no attempt at anything more. Just gone. Elena watched him disappear into the mist, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by the rain. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she started the car and drove off, headlights slicing through the fog, but her mind wasn't on the road anymore. She didn't even know his last name, yet his words kept circling her thoughts. Even machines have limits. Later that night, in her penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline, Elena stood by the window watching the rain trace down the glass. She poured herself a glass of wine, but it didn't taste the same. The world she'd built, full of rules, efficiency, and control, suddenly felt fragile, like one power outage away from chaos. She didn't understand why that stranger's voice wouldn't leave her head, and worse, why the silence that used to comfort her now felt heavier than ever. That night, Elena Voss didn't sleep. For the first time in years, it wasn't a contract or a meeting that kept her awake. It was a pair of steady eyes beneath the rain, and a man who walked away before she could stop him. And somewhere, miles away in a dimly lit garage, Adrian Cole was also awake, tightening a bolt, lost in thoughts he couldn't name. He had met thousands of people, but only one woman whose silence said more than words ever could. He didn't know her world, but something told him. Their paths weren't done crossing. Morning light flooded through the glass walls of Voss Tower, bright enough to burn away the traces of last night's storm, except the ones lodged in Elena's mind. She should have been in the conference room dissecting a merger worth $400 million. Instead, she was replaying a single moment. The way rain had slid down that stranger's jaw, the quiet certainty in his voice when he said even machines have limits. The more she tried to forget, the clearer he became. For years, Elena's mind had been a weapon, precise, obedient, disciplined. But today, it betrayed her. The numbers on her tablet blurred, the board's voices turned to static. Somewhere between the words profit margin and shareholder value, she made a decision that had nothing to do with business. She was going to find him. The search. It started logically, the way everything did for Elena. She asked her assistant to locate the nearest independent auto garage that operates outside Vostech's maintenance network. No reason given, no name, just a hunch. 3 hours later, she had a list of 6. She dismissed 5. The 6th one, Cole Motors, was in a small town an hour outside the city. The name shouldn't have made her heart skip, but it did. By afternoon, she was behind the wheel again, this time in a car she didn't care about, plain black anonymous. The road narrowed, the skyline disappeared behind her. Steel turned to wood, glass to gravel, and for once, Elena Voss didn't look like a billionaire. She looked like a woman who'd lost something and wasn't sure what. The garage was nothing like her world. Oil-stained floors, the faint hiss of welding torches, country rock humming through an old radio, and Adrian leaned against a half-repaired motorcycle, wiping grease from his hands with the same easy calm he'd carried that night. He didn't look surprised when he saw her. He didn't look at anything. Just a flicker of recognition, then a slow, measured smile. "Didn't expect you to follow the storm all the way here," he said. Elena almost forgot how to breathe. "You remember me." Hard to forget a woman who argued with thunder. She should have been irritated by his tone. She wasn't. I came to thank you properly, she managed, though the words tasted thin. And perhaps offer you something more official. Official? He raised a brow. Because I fixed your car? Because I could use your skill. Her voice steadied. Vostech is expanding into luxury automotive AI. I'm hiring a consultant for mechanical insight. You'd be well compensated. He laughed once, a low, honest sound that made her feel absurdly like she was the one being interviewed. So that's what this is? A job offer wrapped in gratitude? Her chin lifted, instinctively returning to the armor of authority. Do you have a problem with that? No, I just like knowing when I'm being studied. The words hit harder than they should have. He saw through her past the polished speech, past the poise, and instead of being impressed, he was amused. She walked the workshop floor, pretending to examine the machines, giving herself time to breathe. The air smelled of iron and rain. You built all this yourself? She asked. Most of it. People throw things away too easily. I like to see what still works. Her gaze flicked toward him. And what if it doesn't? Then you rebuild it or you walk away before it ruins you. The look he gave her after that felt deliberate. And for one strange heartbeat, Elena forgot who she was supposed to be. The silence between them tightened, humming with unspoken questions neither dared to ask. She broke first. I'll have my office send over the details if you're interested, of course. Maybe I am, he said. But I don't work for people who think they already have me figured out. He turned away, back to the bike, dismissing her with the same calm he'd offered the storm. Elena's pulse jumped. No one ever ended a conversation with her. No one walked away. Adrian. The sound of his name leaving her lips startled them both. He looked back, waiting. Why do you keep doing that? She asked quietly. Talking like you know me. He wiped his hands, met her eyes. Because you look like someone who's forgotten how to be known. And then he said nothing more. By the time Elena returned to her car, the sky had begun to clear. She should have felt accomplished. She had found him, made her offer, maintained her composure. But her heart was still racing, her palms cold. Inside her chest, logic and longing were already at war. One told her to forget him. The other whispered that forgetting him was impossible. As she drove away, the reflection of the garage shrank in her rearview mirror, but the echo of his voice stayed. You look like someone who's forgotten how to be known. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a truth she wasn't ready to face. Back at Voss Tower, that evening, as the city lights blinked beneath her windows, Elena stared at the unsigned contract on her desk. Her pen hovered, unmoving. Every instinct screamed that she was crossing a line, mixing business with something volatile, something dangerously human. And yet she signed it. Her assistant would deliver it in the morning. And somewhere deep down, Elena Voss knew. She wasn't hiring Adrian Cole to fix machines. She was hiring him because he'd already started to fix her. The following morning should have felt like any other to Elena Voss, calculated, polished, predictable. But it didn't. Since that encounter in her office, her mind refused to quiet. Adrian Cole had walked out of her glass empire like a man immune to gravity, grounded, steady, unbothered by her wealth or her walls. And that calm was infuriatingly magnetic. She told herself it was professional curiosity. After all, she was a woman who closed billion-dollar contracts with a handshake and a stare. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't strategy. It was disturbance. Days later, the low hum of an engine echoed through her estate's private driveway. Through the misted window of her study, she saw him, the man she shouldn't be waiting for. Adrian stepped out of his truck, every motion unhurried. Rain had followed him again, as though the weather obeyed their encounters. She told herself to breathe, to stay in control. But control had a way of slipping when he was near. When Adrian entered the grand foyer, his boots left faint traces of water on the marble. He paused, hat in hand, his gaze lifting to meet hers. Miss Voss, he greeted, voice low, respectful, and maddeningly calm. Ma'am will do, she replied, too quickly, her tone in armor. But his eyes, steady and unreadable, said otherwise. The air thickened, quiet but charged, like a storm holding its breath. He wasn't looking at her wealth, her sharp tailoring, her carefully curated world. He was looking through it. That unnerved her more than she cared to admit. They walked through the hall toward her private workshop where the prototype car waited the pretense of their meeting. But every step beside him felt like a dialogue unspoken. She noticed the small details. The faint scent of cedar and engine oil clinging to him. The quiet rhythm of his breathing. the way his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms, revealing strength without trying. He glanced sideways once. "You're quiet today." "I'm thinking," she answered, her voice softer than intended. "About business?" he asked, half a smirk playing at his lips. "Always," she lied. When he leaned over the open hood of the car, explaining a minor calibration flaw, her eyes lingered not on the machine, but on him, the way his hand steadied the wrench, the small crease at the corner of his mouth when he concentrated, the effortless precision. Something inside her chest tightened. For a moment she forgot to hide it. Their hands brushed a fleeting accident. But the jolt that followed felt like a live wire beneath skin. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Her pulse betrayed her. His breath caught just barely, and in that suspended silence the world outside seemed to dissolve. "Static electricity," he murmured finally, stepping back, breaking the spell. "Sure," she whispered, though they both knew the current between them had nothing to do with science. They continued working, or pretending to. Words became shorter, glances longer. Every small movement carried weight. A shared look reflected on the car's polished surface, her hand brushing a strand of hair away too slowly, his gaze following without permission. He asked questions he shouldn't. She answered in ways she didn't mean to. By the time the afternoon light had softened into amber, neither remembered how the conversation began, only how near they'd drifted. At one point she reached for a folder. He did too. Their fingers touched again, a whisper of contact. The folder slipped, papers scattering. Both knelt to gather them, eyes meeting halfway. For a heartbeat, time fractured. His hand hesitated above hers. Her breath trembled, a quiet surrender no one had ever heard from her before. Something unspoken passed between them, a promise or perhaps a warning. She stood first, her voice steadier than her heart. "Let's finish this tomorrow," she said, though she didn't mean it. He nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets, reading every word her lips didn't say. "As you wish, ma'am." When he left, the echo of his footsteps lingered, slow, deliberate, like the residue of temptation itself. That night, Elena poured herself a glass of wine, staring at the city lights below. Each one flickered like a thought she couldn't shut off. Her reflection in the glass looked the same, elegant, composed, untouchable. But inside something had cracked open. Adrian Cole had entered her world like a storm, quiet at first, then all-consuming. And she knew. This was only the beginning. The line between control and surrender was thinning, and once crossed, nothing would ever be the same. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell harder now, needling against the glass walls of Elena's penthouse, sharp, restless, unrelenting. Just like her thoughts. She told herself she wouldn't call him. She told herself it was late, that he'd gone home, that this, whatever this was, needed to end before it began. But logic was powerless against the ache that had been building since he left. She moved through her living room like a shadow, barefoot on cold marble, wine forgotten on the table. Her reflection followed her across the window, poised, lonely, and trembling, with something that looked dangerously like need. And then the sound. A knock. 3 slow raps, deliberate, almost cautious. Her pulse leapt. She didn't ask who it was, she already knew. When she opened the door, Adrian stood there, soaked through, rain dripping from his hair, breath unsteady. He didn't smile, neither did she. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the storm did, whispering, roaring, pressing them closer. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally, her voice low, brittle. "I know," he answered. His eyes searched hers, unreadable, intense. "Then why are you?" He stepped closer, water still clinging to his jacket. "Because I couldn't walk away," he said quietly. "Not after today." The air between them snapped tight, invisible, alive. Elena turned, pacing toward the living room, every movement sharp with restraint. "You think you can just show up at my home after one meeting?" "You called me, didn't you?" That stopped her. Her silence gave him the answer. He exhaled, voice rough with control. "You're not used to anyone saying no to you. And you're not used to a woman saying stop." The words clashed like lightning. Her tone was defensive, but her heartbeat betrayed her, wild, uneven, undeniable. She tried to turn away again, but he caught her wrist. Not forcefully. Just enough to make her still. The touch froze time. "Elena," he said softly, his voice breaking through the storm's rhythm. "You keep pretending you're untouchable, but tonight, I saw something real. I saw you." Her chest tightened. No one spoke to her like that. No one dared. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said. But I know what it looks like when someone's tired of pretending. She looked at him, then really looked. The defiance in his eyes wasn't arrogance, it was understanding. Something inside her cracked open. Do you know what it's like, she said suddenly, to have everyone want something from you? Your name, your power, your image, never you. Every man I've met wanted the billionaire, not the woman. Her voice faltered, raw, trembling between anger and confession. Adrian listened, silent, steady, present. That's why you build walls, he said. That's why you don't trust anyone. She nodded, almost in disbelief that he saw her so clearly. And what about you? She asked. Why are you here, Adrian? What do you want? His jaw tightened. He stepped closer. I wish I knew. The admission hung heavy in the air. Honest, dangerous, real. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two people circling the edge of a cliff, both too stubborn to jump, too drawn to step back. This is wrong, she whispered. I know. You work for me. Not tonight. Her breath caught. A storm outside. Another inside. He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. His fingers hesitated midair, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin, close enough to make her tremble. Neither moved. Neither blinked. For a heartbeat, the city lights flickered behind them, painting her face in golden shadow. It wasn't a kiss. It was the space before one, a place where tension breathes and everything sacred trembles. When he finally stepped back, the air between them felt colder, emptier. You should get some rest, he said quietly, voice rough with things unsaid. You're leaving? She asked, the question almost breaking. He nodded once. If I stay, I won't stop myself. And there it was, confession and warning in one. She turned away, every nerve in her body screaming against the distance, every instinct begging to bridge it. But her pride kept her still. Good night, Mr. Cole, she said, trying to sound composed. He paused at the door, rain dripping from his fingertips, gaze burning with unspoken gravity. It's Adrian, he said softly. Then he was gone. When the door closed, Elena stood in the quiet aftermath, her heartbeat still tangled with his. The storm outside had finally started to fade, but inside her chest, it was just beginning. Morning spilled across the glass walls of Voss Tech like liquid gold. The city buzzed below, unaware that the woman who ruled it hadn't slept. Elena stood before the mirror in her office, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and something else, something dangerous. Power was supposed to steady her. Today it trembled in her hands. Adrian arrived just past noon. He'd been called for a meeting about a new design contract, but the air already said this wasn't about blueprints. When he stepped into her office, she didn't look up immediately. She wanted him to wait to feel her authority. But when she finally met his gaze, the game tilted. Mr. Cole, she said, her tone glass smooth. Ms. Voss, he returned, calm as ever. A pause stretched between them, not empty but heavy, humming like live current. The meeting started with diagrams, data, and distant voices. She tried to sound composed. He tried not to notice the faint tremor in her hand when she passed him a pen, but their eyes kept meeting over the table, pulling the conversation off script. Every exchange had a second meaning. Every word landed too close. When she stood to pour coffee, her reflection caught in the window the silhouette of control wrapped in elegance. Adrian moved behind her, close enough for her to sense the warmth of him but not enough to touch. You wanted me to review the new specs, he said quietly. His voice brushed against her ear like a secret. Specs, she repeated, barely breathing. She turned and they were suddenly face to face. No contracts, no titles, just the pulse of two people standing too near. Her composure cracked. A strand of hair slipped from its hold. He noticed. So did she. She stepped back first, forcing the air to cool. Let's stay professional, she murmured. Adrian's half-smile was the kind that knew how fragile that word had become. I'm trying, he said. Try harder. But her voice didn't sound like command anymore, it sounded like plea. They returned to the table. The city lights reflected off the glass, flickering across their faces like the rhythm of an argument neither could win. He leaned over to mark a line on her tablet. His sleeve brushed her wrist. She didn't pull away. Her heartbeat climbed the walls of silence between them. He noticed but said nothing. It was the kind of restraint that hurt more than touch. Do you ever get tired of control? He asked suddenly. The question hit harder than any flirtation. She looked up, startled. Control built this, she said, gesturing to the skyline. And what did it cost? She stared at him, this man who dared to ask what no one else would. It cost nothing, she lied. But the lie cracked halfway out. A tremor of thunder rolled in the distance. He stepped closer again, slow, deliberate. Her desk separated them, but only barely. You keep hiding behind power, he said. It's the only language people understand. Not me. His words hung between them unflinching, and in that moment, she saw the truth. Adrian didn't want her empire. He wanted her, the woman behind the armor. She turned toward the window to escape his gaze. Below, traffic lights blinked like scattered heartbeat signals. Her reflection faced his. No masks, no distance. Why do you keep coming back, she asked softly. Because every time I try to walk away, he said. I remember the look in your eyes when you're not pretending. Her breath hitched. The city felt too quiet, the air too close. Their voices dropped lower, slower, until words blurred into something else, not confession, not seduction, but surrender disguised as defiance. When he finally turned to leave, she stopped him with only a whisper. Adrian! He looked back. Her eyes, once cold as steel, were now molten, uncertain. She didn't move closer. She didn't have to. Everything unspoken burned there already. The door shut behind him. Elena exhaled, one trembling breath after another. Power, for the first time in her life, didn't feel like armor. It felt like temptation. Morning came, dressed in silence. For the first time in years, Elena Voss was afraid of her own reflection. She looked powerful. Every line of her suit, every measured breath still said control. But her eyes told a different story. Last night hadn't left her. It followed her like perfume, soft, impossible to ignore. The memory of Adrian's voice still echoed in her mind, steady, certain, too close. And guilt. Guilt always arrives after the warmth fades. The elevator chimed. A woman stepped out, Lydia Tran, Elena's oldest friend and business partner, the only person who dared walk into her office without knocking. Her heels hit the floor like warning shots. Close the blinds, Lydia said. Elena obeyed. The tone left no room for defiance. Tell me it isn't true, Lydia began. Elena didn't answer. The pause itself was confession. Lydia exhaled sharply, circling the room. You're risking everything for a man who fixes engines. Her voice cut like glass, but it was fear, not judgment. Elena forced a laugh, thin, fragile. You make it sound like a crime to feel something. A crime? No, Lydia snapped, but it's suicide to feel it here in this world. She tossed a folder onto the desk. Photos, headlines, meetings pending with investors. Every piece of paper screamed reputation. You know what they'll say if they find out. They'll devour you, Elena. Elena turned away, her throat tight. I built this company from nothing, and you'll burn it to ashes if you forget who's watching. The storm inside her built again, fierce and invisible. She hated the way Lydia was right, and the way Adrian's name still felt like a heartbeat in her chest. Do you love him? Lydia asked quietly. The question stopped everything. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Love was too small a word for what was happening, too clean for something that felt this raw. I don't know, she whispered. He makes me remember who I was before I became Elena Voss. Lydia's expression softened. For a flicker of a moment, she wasn't a partner warning a CEO, she was a friend watching someone fall. Then remember who you'll be after he's gone, she said gently. Because men like that, storms like that, don't stay. That night, the city lights glowed below her penthouse again. But this time, the skyline didn't feel like victory. It felt like a cage made of glass. She sat alone, scrolling through unsent messages. Don't come back. I can't see you again. I need you. 3 drafts, 1 truth. She didn't know how to let him go. The phone rang. Lydia again. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window, staring out at the rain that had started once more. The same rain that always seemed to arrive when Adrian did. A knock, one sharp sound in the middle of the storm. Her chest tightened, part hope, part fear. She opened the door to find no one, only an envelope, rain-soaked, sitting on the mat. Inside, a single line in his handwriting. You told me once power means control. I think it also means choosing when to let go. She closed her eyes, holding the note like it might burn her fingers. Because guilt wasn't just in her mind now, it had a voice, and it sounded exactly like him. The city was dressed in diamonds that night. Flashes from cameras danced off marble columns and champagne glasses. The annual Voss Foundation Charity Gala, her empire's crown jewel. Every politician, every investor, every headline-hungry guest, they were all there. And Elena was the center of it all. But beneath the flawless gown, beneath the diamond clasp that pinned her hair, she felt her pulse beating against silk. Because she knew. He was here. Adrian. She hadn't seen him in weeks, not since the letter. She told herself it was over. She rehearsed calm smiles and empty words, but when she turned and saw him standing across the hall, dressed in a black suit that looked stolen from someone else's world, her breath simply forgot to exist. The orchestra began to play. She walked through the crowd, the room shimmering around her like a mirage. People called her name. Elena, Miss Voss, over here. But her gaze never broke. Neither did his. Every step toward him felt like a secret. Every heartbeat was an argument between power and longing. He didn't bow or greet her like everyone else. He just looked at her steady, defiant, unafraid, and that alone made her knees weaken. Mr. Cole, she said, the words perfectly formal. But her tone trembled with memory. Elena, he replied, her name rolling off his tongue with a quiet danger. Just her name, and suddenly the whole ballroom disappeared. I didn't know you were invited. I wasn't. Her breath hitched. Then why are you here? To see if you'd pretend not to notice me. That one sentence cracked something open between them. A toast was called. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter rose and the crowd turned toward the stage. But not them. They were still staring, caught in the same invisible pull that neither of them dared name. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Neither should you, he said softly, eyes tracing her face. You look untouchable. And you look like trouble. He smiled that quiet, impossible smile that made the air too thick to breathe. Then we're both exactly where we belong. The tension between them grew like fire in velvet. Every accidental touch, a brush of fingers, a moment too close at the bar, the whisper of his breath against her ear, felt like a confession in disguise. They danced once. Slow. Too close for the cameras, too far for honesty. Her hand trembled in his. His jaw tightened as if holding back 1,000 things he wanted to say. You shouldn't look at me like that, she murmured. Then stop looking back. She didn't. Later, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, Elena slipped away from the ballroom. The marble corridor outside was silent, all gold and shadow. Her heels echoed like a countdown. She stopped at the balcony. The city stretched beneath her like a promise she no longer trusted. And then, the door behind her opened. No words, just the sound of footsteps, steady, sure, deliberate. Why are you here? She asked without turning. Because you didn't tell me to leave. She faced him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them was a question neither wanted to answer. You think this is easy for me? She said, voice breaking between anger and want. You think I don't know what this costs? He stepped closer. I think you've forgotten what anything real feels like. Her breath caught. You don't know me. He smiled, soft but sharp. Then why are you shaking? She hated him for seeing it, and loved him for not pretending he didn't. The storm inside her broke, one step then another, until the air between them was just heat and heartbeat. He didn't reach for her. He waited. And when her hand finally touched his chest, it wasn't control she felt. It was surrender disguised as defiance. Her eyes searched his, fierce and afraid. If I do this, she whispered, there's no going back. Then stop walking backward. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was everything. Outside, thunder rolled through the sky. Inside, every rule she'd ever written began to fall apart. The night didn't ask for permission, it simply took. Took every wall, every mask, every reason to pretend. When morning came, the city would still belong to Elena Voss. But tonight, she wasn't the billionaire or the icon or the woman everyone feared. Tonight she was just a woman who couldn't walk away. Morning arrived like an accusation. Soft light crept through the tall windows, gliding across marble floors and half-drawn curtains. The mansion was silent, too silent except for the low hum of the city waking outside. Elena Voss sat at the edge of her bed, the silk of her robe clinging to her bare shoulders, her reflection fractured in the mirror before her. The woman looking back didn't look powerful. She looked human, and that scared her more than anything. Every breath she took reminded her of what she'd done, or worse, what she wanted to do again. Her fingers brushed her collarbone, where his touch still lingered like heat under the skin. Foolish, she muttered to herself, voice unsteady. Completely foolish. But even as she said it, she could still hear his voice from hours ago, low, rough, impossible to forget. The memory of it curled through her chest like smoke. She pressed her hands against her face. Get it together, Elena. But reason had no power here, not anymore. A soft knock broke the silence. It wasn't her staff, they never knocked like that. Her pulse spiked. Then came his voice, muffled but certain. Elena? She closed her eyes. For one fragile second she wanted to tell him to go, to disappear before her mind betrayed her heart again, but she couldn't. "Come in," she said, barely above a whisper. The door opened. Adrian stood there, hair slightly disheveled, jacket slung over his arm, eyes uncertain as though the night had both given and taken something from him. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the faint sound of rain dripping from the roof outside filled the space. He broke first. "I should go," he said quietly. "You've got a company to run, a world to protect." Her throat tightened. "And you?" "I'm just the mistake you'll try to forget." The words hit her harder than she expected. She stood, robe falling lightly against her frame. "Don't reduce it to that." "Then what is it, Elena?" His tone wasn't angry, it was raw, searching. "Tell me what last night was supposed to mean." She didn't answer. She couldn't, because there were no words big enough to fit what she felt. All she could do was look at him, really look at him, the man who'd seen through every wall she'd built. The man who looked at her like she wasn't a headline or an empire, but a woman who could still be touched, still be wanted. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "You think I can just walk away?" he said, stepping closer. "That I can pretend none of this happened?" She met his gaze, her voice a fragile whisper. "You should. Say that again," he murmured, closing the space between them. "But this time, mean it." Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't. Silence stretched thin. The air between them grew heavy, full of everything unsaid, everything dangerous. He looked at her like he wanted to remember her forever. And she looked at him like she wanted to forget how badly she needed to. Finally she whispered, "I'm scared." He blinked, startled. "Of me? Of what you make me want?" That confession shattered the room's stillness. He exhaled slowly, as though steadying himself against something invisible. "Elena, don't," she interrupted, turning away. "If I let this continue, I lose everything, my company, my reputation, my control." He moved closer, voice soft but sure. "And if you stop it, what do you lose then?" She froze. His hand brushed her shoulder, tentative but grounding. Her breath trembled. Her control, that perfect armor, started to crack again. The sunlight stretched further across the floor, tracing the shape of two people trapped between what they wanted and what they couldn't allow. "Tell me to go," he said again, voice quiet. Her heartbeat thundered. She turned eyes wide, searching, and finally said the words that terrified her more than silence itself. "I don't want you to." The confession hung in the air like lightning before a storm. He stared at her, disbelief flickering into something deeper. "Elena, don't talk," she whispered. "Just stay." For once, the woman who commanded boardrooms, who silenced CEOs with a glance, was asking. Not ordering, asking. That more than anything undid him. He set his jacket down, careful, reverent. The sound of the rain softened, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Neither moved closer, not yet. But the space between them pulsed with unspoken truth. She looked at him, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to be this version of myself." "Then let me find her with you," he said. And in that single sentence, something inside her surrendered, not out of weakness, but relief. The morning light shifted. It painted their silhouettes in gold, as though blessing what neither of them could name. Elena closed her eyes, letting the world fall away for just a moment, a stolen breath of peace in a life that had never allowed it. Whatever came next, she knew it would change everything. And still, she didn't stop him. Because some fires aren't meant to be put out. They're meant to burn. It started with a photo, a single frame stolen, grainy, but enough. Elena's reflection, caught through a half-open balcony door, her hand resting against Adrian's chest, the city lights behind them like 1,000 watching eyes. By morning, it was everywhere. The headlines didn't say her name outright. They didn't have to. Mystery man linked to billionaire CEO? Power, passion, and a mechanic? Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Her assistant's voice shook over the intercom. "Ms. Voss, the board is demanding an emergency meeting." Elena stood by the window of her office tower, 20 floors above the chaos. The city stretched out beneath her, cold, gray, unforgiving. And for the first time, she felt small. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stepped in, his face tense, jaw set, eyes dark with the kind of anger that comes from guilt. "I told you this would happen," he said quietly. She turned. "You think I wanted this?" "No," he said, voice steady. "But you knew it couldn't stay hidden." The tension between them was sharp, not romantic now, but protective, desperate. He looked ready to take the blame. She looked ready to burn the world to stop him. "Don't say a word to the press," she ordered. Don't answer calls, don't post anything, I'll handle it. He frowned. Handle it? Elena, they're calling me your scandal. Her voice cracked just once. You think I don't hear them calling me worse? Their eyes met two storms colliding. You don't belong in this mess, she whispered. Then why did you pull me into it? The question landed like glass shattering. Outside cameras flashed in the rain. Inside, the boardroom filled with silence as she walked in. Her heels clicked like warning shots. Every face turned men in dark suits, eyes cold, mouths tight. One of them slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, the photo. Her photo. Elena, the chairman said, voice controlled but sharp. Tell us this isn't what it looks like. She smiled thin, lethal. It's exactly what it looks like. Gasps. Murmurs. One man dropped his pen. You're jeopardizing the company's reputation, another board member snapped. Investors are calling, the press is circling like vultures. She leaned forward, eyes fierce. Let them circle. I built this empire. I decide what it survives. But inside her hands trembled beneath the table. Because for all her strength, she could still feel his touch from last night. And that alone could ruin her. Hours later, the office emptied. She stayed behind, sitting in the dark. The rain began again, tracing slow paths down the glass. A reflection moved behind her. Adrian. You faced them, he asked quietly. Yes. And? They want your head. He exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. I'll leave, that's what you want, isn't it? She didn't answer. Not at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost broken. If you leave, they'll think I'm protecting you. And if I stay? Her eyes lifted to meet his tired, furious aching. They'll know I am. He took a step closer. The storm outside cracked with lightning, the flash reflecting between them. You're trembling, he said quietly. Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Then stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you're the only thing that still feels real. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was thick, full of words neither dared to say. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Elena, he murmured, you don't have to fight the whole world alone. Her throat tightened. I've done it all my life. Then let someone fight for you this time. She looked at him, really looked, and something in her chest gave way. Because he wasn't just the risk anymore. He was the reason she still had a heart left to lose. The storm outside grew louder. He turned to leave, but she stopped him with a whisper. Adrian. He turned. Her next words came out trembling, quiet, defiant, and full of surrender all at once. I don't want you to disappear again. He hesitated, then stepped closer until the distance between them dissolved. For a heartbeat, the whole world disappeared. No rumors, no cameras, no boardrooms. Just two people standing too close, trying not to fall apart. Her voice barely rose above the rain. They think this is my weakness, she said. He brushed a hand down her arm, slow, grounding. Then prove them wrong. Her eyes flickered with something dangerous. Or prove them right, she whispered. The air thickened, heat and fear tangled together. It wasn't control this time. It was chaos, the kind that felt like truth. Outside, the city whispered their names like a rumor that wouldn't die. Inside, the fire they started refused to burn out. And as the storm raged, Elena realized she'd spent her life building walls to keep power in. But sometimes it took one reckless man to remind her. The strongest walls still cracked from the inside. The night refused to end. The city below was a blur of lights, the sky bruised with the memory of thunder. Elena hadn't slept, she couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photo, the flash, the scandal, the betrayal. And beneath it all, his face, Adrian. The man who had walked into her world like he didn't know the rules, and broke every single one just by standing too close. Morning came like punishment. Her office buzzed with calls, messages, damage control, lawyers, PR managers, shareholders breathing down her neck. By noon, she'd signed off 3 statements, canceled 2 meetings, and buried one more part of herself. Then he showed up. No appointment, no warning. Just Adrian standing in the doorway of her office like a storm she'd tried and failed to contain. Her chest tightened. He wasn't supposed to be there, not today. Not when the air was thick with ruin. Adrian. Don't, he said, cutting her off. His voice was low, rough, the kind that made even silence lean in to listen. He stepped closer. The guards hesitated at the door, one look from her, and they left. It was just the two of them now. You shouldn't be here, she said, her tone clipped, controlled. I needed to see you. For what, to make this worse? He gave a short laugh, not cruel, just tired. I didn't leak that photo, Elena. I know, she whispered, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, he repeated, incredulous. It's your life, your name they're dragging through every screen in this city. She turned away, staring out the window again. I've been dragged through worse. He stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth of him behind her, the faint scent of engine oil and rain still clinging to his skin. You think you can buy silence again, don't you, he said. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You're about to offer me money, to disappear. She froze. He saw it, the flicker in her expression, the plan she hadn't spoken yet. He shook his head slowly. I'm not for sale, Elena. Her throat went dry. You think I don't know that, she said. This isn't about money, it's about control, he cut in. It's always about control with you. Her voice faltered. That's how I survive. He exhaled, stepped closer until the space between them was barely a breath. I'm not asking you to survive me, he said quietly. I'm asking you to be real with me. She turned, and for the first time her composure cracked just a small fracture across that perfect surface she'd built. Her eyes glimmered not with power, but with exhaustion. Real? She echoed. You want truth? Fine. She took a step toward him, every inch of her trembling but defiant. I wanted you because you didn't need me, because you didn't worship me or fear me. You looked at me like I was human, and She stopped herself, chest rising fast. He watched her, silent, unreadable. Finally he spoke low, steady but burning. I don't want your money, Elena. I don't want your empire. I just want to know if you still know who you are when the mask comes off. Her breath caught. He reached up slowly, deliberately, and brushed his thumb along her jawline. A ghost of a touch, not a claim, not a command. A reminder. Her body stiffened, but her eyes fluttered shut just for a heartbeat. You walk into every room like you own it, he murmured. You talk like nothing can touch you, but underneath... His voice trailed off. She opened her eyes, sharp, defensive. Underneath what? He held her gaze. Underneath, you're still the woman who forgets to breathe when someone actually sees her. The silence that followed was dangerous. Alive, she laughed, a shaky sound that barely passed for composure. You're wrong, she said, stepping back. I don't forget, I choose. He nodded. Then choose right now. Her lips parted. What? Choose me, or choose the lie that keeps you safe. Her pulse quickened. You think it's that simple? He smiled faintly. It's always that simple, you just make it complicated. Her heels clicked once on the marble floor as she took a slow step closer again. Her voice softened, dangerously soft. And if I choose wrong? He leaned in close enough that his breath traced her skin, not touching but igniting every nerve that still remembered the last time he had. Then you'll finally know what it feels like to live instead of control. The tension coiled tighter. His eyes flicked down to her lips, not in hunger, but in hesitation, like he knew what it would cost both of them if he moved 1 inch closer. And then, her phone buzzed. The spell broke. She turned sharply, grabbing it from the desk, eyes wide. The screen glowed with a name that froze the air in her lungs. Board chairman, incoming call. Adrian watched her. Go ahead, he said quietly. Answer it. She hesitated, fingers trembling over the screen. Not like this, she whispered. Like what? He asked. Like I have something to hide. She silenced the call. When she looked back up, her eyes were glassy, not from fear, but something deeper. You could have taken the money, she said. You could have let this disappear. He shook his head. I don't bow for money, Elena, not even yours. For a moment, the whole building seemed to hold its breath. Something inside her broke quietly, not in defeat, but in surrender, because no one had ever stood in front of her and refused her before. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then what do you want? He smiled, that small, disarming smile that stripped her armor clean off. Your truth. The words lingered, echoing between them. Not her power, not her beauty, not her wealth. Just the truth, the one thing she'd never given anyone freely. Her hand brushed against his, slow, uncertain. He didn't pull away, and for the first time she wasn't sure if she wanted to. Outside, the world still spun with scandal and noise. Inside, two people stood in a silence heavy enough to feel like gravity. She whispered his name. He didn't move. Adrian. Her next words came softer, trembling but honest, the kind of honesty that can undo a person. You terrify me. His gaze didn't waver. Good, he murmured. That means you finally feel something real. And in that moment, Elena Voss, the woman who owned half the skyline, realized something terrifying. She could survive betrayal, power struggles, even scandal, but she wasn't sure she could survive him. The morning headlines hit like a wrecking ball. Billionaire secret liaison exposed. Elena Voss love lies in a mechanic. Board demands answers. Every channel, every feed, every whisper. By noon her empire wasn't trembling, it was cracking. Inside the glass tower, Elena stood at the head of the boardroom table. The place where she'd once commanded silence with a single glance. Now silence commanded her. 11 men and women her board stared at her with polished disapproval. Her best friend Naomi sat at the far end, eyes full of warning and heartbreak. "Miss Voss," one of them said, his voice crisp and venomously polite. "This situation has become untenable." "Situation?" Elena echoed, the faintest tremor in her tone. Another board member adjusted his tie. "The media is branding this company as a soap opera. Investors are spooked. Unless you release a statement ending your relationship with Mr. Cole, your seat, your legacy, will be reconsidered." For the first time in her life, Elena didn't speak right away. The room felt like ice, her heartbeat the only sound she could hear. She wanted to shout, to remind them who built this empire from code and sleepless nights, who turned an idea into a global powerhouse. But all she could think about was him. Adrian, the man who wouldn't bow, the man who refused her money and demanded her truth. And now, because of him, or maybe because of herself, everything she'd built was slipping through her fingers. That night, her penthouse felt like a cage made of glass and guilt. Rain hammered the windows, lightning flashing like the cameras outside had followed her home. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, emails, her PR team begging her to respond. She ignored them all. The only message that made her pause was from Naomi. "They're serious, you have until morning." She read it twice, then again, until the words blurred. Then a knock. A quiet, familiar knock. Her pulse quickened. She didn't need to check who it was. When she opened the door, there he stood soaked from the rain, jaw tight, eyes heavy with worry. "Adrian," she breathed. He stepped in, water dripping from his jacket onto her marble floor. "I saw the news," he said, voice low. "They're tearing you apart out there." She tried to smile, but it didn't hold. "I've been torn apart before. Not like this." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside rattled the glass, thunder rolling like a warning neither wanted to hear. Then he spoke again, softer this time. "I should leave, I'm making this worse." "Don't," she said quickly. It came out too fast, too desperate. He looked at her, really looked. Her silk blouse clung faintly to her skin from the humidity, her hair loose for once, framing a face that was both powerful and breaking. "You don't get it," she whispered. "They want me to end it publicly, to pretend you were just a mistake." He swallowed hard. "Is that what you think I am?" Her answer came too quiet, too raw. "No. You're the only thing that doesn't feel like a lie." He took a slow step toward her, then another, until the air between them felt charged again, thick, fragile, dangerous. She looked up at him, every defense slipping with each second of silence. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You don't fix it," he murmured. "You face it." Her breath hitched as his hand lifted, hesitating before brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was barely there, yet it burned through every layer of restraint she had left. Lightning flashed, painting the room in brief electric light. For that single second, she looked at him and something inside her fractured. She'd spent her whole life mastering control, but control couldn't save her from him. She turned away, not to run, but to breathe. Her reflection in the window stared back at her. "Elena Voss, billionaire, genius, scandal, fool. I built my world on control," she whispered. "And now I'm losing it to someone who fixes engines." Adrian's voice was steady, almost too calm. "Maybe that's the first thing you've ever done right." She spun to face him, anger, heartbreak, and something wilder in her eyes. "Right?" she snapped. "I'm about to lose everything." "Maybe everything isn't what you think it is," he said. His tone wasn't defiant, it was true, and it disarmed her more than any argument could. "Tell me, Elena," he said, stepping closer again. "When was the last time you did something for yourself, not for your company, your image, your shareholders, you?" Her throat tightened. She couldn't answer. His hand found hers, rough palm warm, grounding. Her fingers twitched, ready to pull away, but they didn't. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming like a heartbeat against the glass. "You think you're losing everything," he whispered. "But maybe this is the first time you're finding out who you really are." She looked at him, and in that moment, the empire, the board, the headlines all disappeared. There was only the storm, the scent of rain, The man who saw her, not the myth. He didn't kiss her. He didn't have to. The tension between them said more than any words could, an ache that hummed through the air. Too alive to be ignored. Too forbidden to be named. Her breath came shallow. His hand lingered at her wrist, not restraining but reminding her she wasn't alone in the wreckage. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "They'll destroy me for this." He leaned closer, eyes steady. "Then let them try." The thunder outside cracked like a warning from the heavens, but Elena didn't flinch this time. For the first time, she didn't care who was watching, who would write what headline tomorrow, because the truth wasn't in her empire, it was in this chaos, in him. And as the storm raged on, she realized something terrifyingly beautiful. She wasn't falling from power. She was falling into something deeper, something she couldn't control. "Because I don't want your empire," he said softly. "I want you without the crown." The words hit harder than any headline. She turned away, pacing toward the window. Below, the city glittered like broken glass. Her reflection looked back, powerful, frightened, human. "If I lose this company, I lose everything I've ever known." Adrian came up behind her, close enough for her to feel his warmth without touching. "Then maybe it's time you learned something new." Her pulse stumbled. The tension was a live wire, unspoken, electric. Every breath felt like a dare. A single flash of lightning lit the room, outlining their shadows against the glass. Two figures, queen and rebel, standing on the edge of ruin. She turned slowly, and for once there was no mask left to wear. The exhaustion, the fear, the longing, all of it raw in her eyes. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He simply reached up and traced the air beside her face, a breath away from contact. "Because when the world burns," he said quietly, "I'd rather be in the fire with you than safe in someone else's shadow." Something broke inside her, then, not weakness, something truer. The world could gossip, the board could threaten, but in that moment the only truth that mattered was standing inches away, refusing to bow. Outside, thunder rolled like applause. Inside, Elena drew a breath that trembled but didn't falter. "Then let them come," she said. And when she looked back out over the city, her reflection was no longer a woman undone, but a warrior crowned in chaos. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Neither had the headlines. "Voss Tech on the brink. The mechanic and the queen. Board prepares vote of no confidence." Elena Voss watched the news in silence from her penthouse window, the glow of the screen flickering against the glass. Every word felt like a verdict. That morning, her assistant had said it gently. "They're calling for your resignation." By noon, Naomi had called it what it was. "They're coming for blood." And by nightfall, Adrian called once, left a message she couldn't delete. "Don't let them take what you built, and don't let them turn us into shame." The next day, the board convened. A marble table, 12 faces, one battlefield. Elena entered wearing black knot-fashion armor, her hair swept back, her expression carved from stone. "Let's begin," she said. The chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Voss, the investors want assurance. The situation has cost us 4 major accounts." "Assurance," she repeated, "or obedience?" A murmur rippled. Naomi's eyes flicked toward her, "Don't push too far." But Elena had already crossed that line weeks ago. Halfway through the meeting, a phone vibrated. Someone slid a photo across the table, a new leak. Elena froze. It wasn't explicit, yet the story it told was enough. Her hand gripping Adrian's wrist, both of them caught mid-motion, light tracing the tension between them. Someone whispered, "You've turned the company into a spectacle." She stood. "I turned it into an empire." Her voice cracked like lightning against the polished calm. Outside the conference room, the press was waiting. Cameras, flashes, questions thrown like stones. "Ms. Voss, do you confirm the relationship? Is he blackmailing you? Did you promote him for personal reasons?" She didn't answer, but her silence became its own headline. That evening, Adrian appeared at her private elevator, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes burning with the kind of anger that comes from love that's been pushed too far. "You should have told me they were voting you out," he said. "You should have stayed away," she replied. "I tried." The words hung between them, heavy, wet, honest. She could smell rain on his jacket, engine oil under his skin. Everything about him clashed with her world of glass and chrome. And that was exactly why she couldn't let him go. He stepped closer. "You're fighting ghosts, Elena. Let me stand with you." She shook her head. "They'd destroy you." "I've been destroyed before." Her breath caught. The memory of his defiance was the only steady thing left. "Why won't you just take what I offer?" she whispered. The morning after the storm, the city felt too quiet, as if even the sky was holding its breath. Elena Voss sat in her penthouse office. the one place she'd once felt untouchable. Now every surface reminded her of him. The window where they'd stood too close. The desk where his hand had brushed hers once by accident. The silence that followed heavier than thunder. Her phone buzzed. Naomi's voice tense. "Elena, the investors have agreed to delay the vote, but only if you issue a public statement ending it for good." The words landed like ice in her veins. End it. She looked out at the skyline, her empire, her cage. Somewhere out there he was walking the same city, unaware of the deal she was about to make with the devil. That night she called him. Her voice was calm, controlled. The same tone she used to fire executives to negotiate billion-dollar contracts. But not this time, not really. "Adrian," she began, "we can't keep doing this." He was silent on the other end. She could hear the faint echo of his breath, uneven. "This isn't about them," he said finally. "It's about you. You're scared to choose something that isn't safe." She closed her eyes. "You think this is about fear?" "It's always been about fear." Her throat tightened. "You don't understand." "I understand too well," he interrupted. "You'd rather break your own heart than let anyone see you bleed." The line went quiet. No argument, no goodbye. Just a silence that filled the room like smoke. The next morning, her assistant mentioned that Adrian hadn't come into the shop. By noon, his number was disconnected. By sunset, his apartment was empty. No forwarding address, no message. Just gone. The absence hit her harder than any headline. At night, she'd find herself glancing at the balcony, half expecting his shadow in the rain. But the city stayed still. Days turned into weeks. Her empire survived, but something inside her didn't. She moved through meetings like a ghost, polished, brilliant, hollow. Every decision, every headline, every triumph tasted like ash. At a press conference, a reporter asked, "Ms. Voss, how do you balance passion and professionalism?" She smiled for the cameras, voice flawless. "By remembering that one must never interfere with the other." But the lie caught in her throat like glass. That night she went home and stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the billionaire or the genius or the scandal. It was someone stripped bare, haunted by what she couldn't say. She reached for her phone again. Typed his name, deleted it, typed it again, stared at it until the letters blurred. No message came. Naomi found her in the office one night, the lights off, city glowing below. "Elena," she said softly, "you can't keep doing this to yourself." Elena didn't look up. "He's gone." Naomi hesitated. "You made him go." The words were gentle, but they landed like a slap. Elena turned, voice trembling. "I did it to protect him." Naomi sighed. "You did it to protect yourself from what it means to need someone." Later, alone again, Elena walked through her penthouse as if seeing it for the first time. The vast emptiness, the quiet hum of machines, the faint scent of him still clinging to the air. She stood by the window, palms pressed against the cold glass. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, her heartbeat was the only thing she could hear. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, she could almost feel it again. His breath against her skin. His voice low, defiant. "I'd rather be in the fire with you." It wasn't a memory anymore. It was a haunting. Days later, her driver handed her an envelope, no return address. Inside, a note in familiar handwriting. "Don't look for me. Not until you're ready to stop hiding behind your crown." Her fingers trembled as she read it again and again. The ink smudged slightly like it had been written in haste or hesitation. She pressed the note to her chest and exhaled a sound she hadn't made in years, a sound that wasn't anger, or pride, or control. It was loss. Pure human loss. That night, Elena didn't go to sleep. She stood on the balcony, wind tugging at her hair, rain brushing her cheeks like uninvited memories. The city below gleamed like the world she'd built, bright, merciless, endless, but she didn't feel like its queen anymore. She felt like its prisoner, and somewhere out there, in that same city, the man who had refused to bow had finally disappeared into the silence she'd created. The boardroom applauded. Champagne glasses clinked. The quarterly report gleamed in the projection light, numbers soaring, stocks rebounding, headlines shifting from scandal to success. "Elena Voss has done it again," the anchors said. "She's untouchable." Untouchable. She used to like that word. Now it felt like a sentence. Elena smiled for the cameras, said all the right things. About resilience, innovation, leadership. Every word polished to perfection. But when the applause faded and the doors closed, she stayed seated. The leather chair was warm beneath her palms, the skyline stretched endless outside the glass, and yet she felt cold. Power without passion was supposed to be freedom. Instead, it felt like standing on top of a mountain made of glass, sharp, fragile, lonely. In the evenings, her apartment echoed differently. The lights seemed too bright, her reflection too sharp. The hum of the elevator, the click of her heels, everything reminded her of absence. She still reached for her phone sometimes, at muscle memory, not hope. But the number was still disconnected. One night she came home from a late-board dinner. The rain had started again, soft, deliberate, the kind that made the city look like it was holding secrets. She poured herself a drink, neat like him, and leaned against the counter. The smell of whiskey rose, sharp and familiar. She remembered the night he'd first poured it for her in the workshop. When she'd pretended to dislike the burn, he'd smiled that smile and said, "Then let it burn slower." She hadn't known then how prophetic those words would become. She walked through the penthouse, glass in hand, trailing her fingers along the furniture as if touching memories. The couch, the window, the table where they'd sat across from each other, the air between them charged with all the words they never said. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, staring at nothing. Her phone vibrated. "Naomi, of course."
"Elena," came the voice through the speaker. "The shareholders want you in Zurich next week, expansion meeting. You should rest before then."
Elena's voice was calm, almost too calm. "I'm fine." Naomi paused. "You sound empty." Elena smiled faintly. "Empty women don't build empires." She ended the call before her voice could betray her. At 2 a.m. she woke to the sound of thunder. Her dream still clung to her skin heat. Breath, the sound of her name spoken like it was sacred. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest. Her pulse was wild, not from fear, but from memory. She got out of bed barefoot and walked to the balcony. Rain swept across the city like tears the sky refused to hide. And there, standing in the reflection of her glass doors, she saw herself. A woman draped in silken sorrow, eyes too bright, lips parted like she might whisper a name she swore she'd forget. Her breath fogged the glass. Her hand lifted almost unconsciously, tracing the outline of a memory. It wasn't a dream that haunted her. It was him. The sound of his defiance. The warmth that lingered long after the fire. She pressed her forehead to the cool window and let out a quiet, broken laugh. "Look at you," she whispered. "Queen of everything, prisoner of one man's ghost." The next morning, the news hailed her again. Voss Industries breaks new record. Elena Voss nominated for Global Innovator of the Year. She watched her own face on the screen, perfect makeup, poised expression. The world saw power. Only she knew it was armor. At the Zurich summit, she moved like clockwork: presentations, interviews, handshakes. Every man in the room looked at her like she was both a miracle and a threat. And she played the part flawlessly. But during a gala dinner, someone mentioned Adrian's name. A casual comment, an investor saying, "Didn't you have that young designer once, the one who made your prototypes? Brilliant, wasn't he?" Her hand tightened around her wine glass. "Yes," she said softly, "brilliant." The word tasted like something sweet and painful on her tongue. That night in her hotel suite, she stood before the mirror again. The city lights outside glittered against her skin. Her necklace caught the glow diamonds, cold and perfect. She looked powerful. She looked untouched. But when she reached to unclasp the necklace, her hands trembled. Because beneath the satin, beneath the steel, beneath the name, there was still the ache. The woman who had once felt his breath near her ear, his voice low, his conviction unshakable. She had control now, everything she'd ever wanted. And yet, it felt like nothing. Later, as she sat by the window staring down at Zurich's sleeping skyline, she whispered almost to herself, "I won." But the word sounded hollow. Because in the echo of it, she could almost hear his voice, that low, rough tone that had once made her lose her balance. "You don't win by control, Elena. You win by feeling." She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. Control had its price, and it was everything that made her alive. When she returned to New York, her assistant greeted her with flowers and fresh headlines. "Elena, the market's up 3 points. You're being called the comeback queen." She smiled faintly. Queens don't come back. They simply wait for the world to remember who they are. But even as she said it, her gaze drifted to the corner of her desk where a small folded note still sat, creased, smudged, unread but never thrown away. "Don't look for me. Not until you're ready to stop hiding behind your crown." She touched the paper with the tip of her finger, the same way you touch something you know will burn but can't resist. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't reach for her phone or her planner. She just sat there, letting herself feel it. The ache, the want, The memory of the man who had seen the woman behind the empire and refused to bow. It started like any other morning. Sunlight spilled across the skyline, cutting through the glass walls of Voss Industries like a blade of gold. Assistants whispered, screens glowed, and the world moved to her command, precise, flawless, obedient. Elena was a queen again. At least that's what everyone believed. But that morning something unusual waited on her desk. Not a contract, not a report. A letter. A single envelope. Unmarked, unassuming. But the handwriting that was the first thing that stopped her breath. It was his, Adrian's. Her fingers hovered above it for a long time. The room suddenly felt too small, too still. Outside the city moved horns, sirens, laughter, but inside, it was just her and the echo of his ghost on paper. She broke the seal. The scent hit her first faint like rain and oil and the trace of smoke that had always clung to his skin. Then the words. Just one line written in his sharp, deliberate hand. You told me to stop, but I never did. I'm still getting there. Her knees almost gave out. The letter trembled between her fingers like something alive. For a moment she forgot to breathe. The world blurred the skyline, the light, her own reflection in the glass wall. All she could see was that sentence. All she could feel was the pulse that memory brought back to life. Adrian, the man who had looked her in the eye and seen straight through the walls she'd built. The man who had made her forget she was untouchable. She pressed her thumb over the ink, tracing it like a wound. Every letter felt personal, like he'd written it to her skin, not to paper. Elena? Naomi's voice snapped her back. Her assistant stood in the doorway, a folder in hand. Elena quickly folded the letter, sliding it under another file. Yes? Naomi hesitated. You look pale. I'm fine. It was the same lie she'd been telling for weeks. Naomi nodded, but her eyes lingered. The Zurich clients confirmed, and the Paris board wants your statement on the new AI merge. Elena exhaled, nodding automatically. Tell them I'll send it by evening. But as soon as Naomi left, she pulled the letter back into her hands. Reading it again, and again, until it didn't feel like reading anymore. It felt like hearing him. That voice, low, rough, impossible to forget. You told me to stop. Her pulse quickened. But I never did. She closed her eyes. Her mind filled with flashes, the garage, the storm, his hand at her wrist, his eyes that dared her to feel. I'm still getting there. A shiver ran through her. Still getting where? To her? To what they started? Or to something darker, something she wasn't ready to face? By noon she couldn't focus. Meetings blurred. Words passed her like static. Every sound in the room reminded her of him, the hum of the AC like his breath near her ear, the flicker of the projector like the glint in his eyes. She excused herself mid-sentence and left the boardroom. No one dared to stop her. Back in her penthouse, she dropped her bag on the counter and stood in silence. The letter lay on her kitchen island, now unfolded, the ink gleaming faintly under the soft light. She walked toward it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. Her heels clicked against the marble, deliberate, rhythmic, the only sound breaking the stillness. She read it one more time. Then again. The meaning shifted each time, first like a challenge, then a confession, then something else entirely. A promise. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper, lingering. She could almost imagine him standing just behind her, close enough for her skin to remember the warmth. She swallowed hard, whispering to the empty room, What are you still getting to, Adrian? That night she couldn't sleep. The letter sat beside her bed, the words echoing like a heartbeat. She turned the lamp off, but the darkness didn't quiet her thoughts, it only made them louder. In her dreams, the letter came alive, his handwriting shifting, his voice whispering that same sentence in the dark, closer each time until she could feel it. You told me to stop. A breath. But I never did. A touch, not real, but remembered. I'm still getting there. Her chest rose sharply, her fingers gripping the sheets. And when she woke, she wasn't sure if the sound that escaped her lips was a sigh or a name. Morning light poured through her curtains, warm and accusing. She found herself standing at the balcony. The city spread below like a reflection of her thoughts, chaotic, brilliant, untamed. The letter was still there on the nightstand. But now another one waited, slipped under her door sometime during the night. Same paper, same handwriting. Only this time, no envelope. Her heart pounded as she unfolded it. If you want to stop pretending, meet me where the storm began. She didn't need to ask what that meant. She knew. The old workshop on 7th. The place where she first found him, soaked, furious, unbroken. Her throat tightened. Every part of her said no. Logic, reputation, the empire she'd built brick by brick. But somewhere deeper beneath the layers of armor, something whispered go. She stared at the note until the words blurred. Her hand trembled. Her heart raced. Control had always been her strength, but now it felt like a chain. She folded the note carefully, slipped it into her jacket pocket, and took one long, steady breath. Then with a quiet finality, she turned toward the door. The elevator doors closed behind her, and for the first time in months, she wasn't walking toward power. She was walking toward him. She didn't leave quietly. Elena Voss never did anything quietly. When she walked out of her office that morning, no announcement, no explanation, the entire floor froze. Assistants whispered her name like a rumor. The sound of her heels striking marble echoed like a countdown. She left behind her empire, her board, her crown, and for the first time she didn't care who was watching. Because there was only one thing she needed to find now: the man who made her remember what it felt like to be alive. The city felt different without her usual armor. No tailored suit. No entourage. Just Elena in a soft cashmere coat, her hair loose, her heart even looser. She started where it all began, the old workshop on 7th Avenue. The place where a storm had once brought a billionaire and a mechanic to the same spark of fate. The lights were out now. Dust coated the windows, but when she stepped inside, the air still carried a trace of him: oil, cedarwood, and rain. Her fingers brushed the workbench, tracing faint outlines left by tools long gone. She found the old stool where she had once sat, pretending she didn't notice how close he stood, pretending his voice didn't unravel her composure. "Elena," he had said back then, quiet but firm. "You can't control what you feel, you can only admit it." She had walked away that night, too proud to answer. Now she whispered into the empty space. You were right. The next place she went was a small diner outside the city, the one where he used to grab coffee at 2 a.m. The waitress remembered him immediately. Tall guy, dark eyes, always ordered black coffee and left big tips. Elena smiled softly. Yes, that's him. The woman leaned closer, studying her. You're the one he used to wait for. The words hit harder than she expected. Wait for, not chase, not demand. Just wait. She sat in his old booth, tracing the rim of a coffee cup. The steam curled upward, reminding her of his breath near her neck that night, the one she still dreamed about but never spoke of. It wasn't just his touch she missed. It was how he looked at her, not like a billionaire, not like an icon, but like a woman worth knowing, worth fighting with, worth breaking for. As the sun sank lower, she found herself on the edge of town near the small coastal road where he used to ride his old motorcycle. The wind was sharp, but she didn't care. She stood at the cliffside, hair whipping wildly, eyes scanning the horizon as if the sea might return him. Everything she owned couldn't fill the hollow space he'd left. Every success, every trophy, none of it matched the way her pulse had once answered his. Night fell. She stopped at a small inn, tucked away between the hills. The owner, an elderly man, smiled as she checked in. Traveling alone, he asked. She hesitated. No, I'm finding someone. He nodded knowingly, sliding her the key. Sometimes finding them means finding yourself first. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, moonlight painting silver across her face. The ocean whispered below, rhythmic and endless, and like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She thought about the letter again, his words, his promise. You told me to stop, but I never did. She could almost hear it, his voice, low and patient, the kind that carried warmth even in silence. She closed her eyes, her hand pressed against her chest as if to calm the storm inside her. Every place she'd gone, every corner of her past, led her not just to him, but back to herself, the version of Elena that had laughed freely, that had felt electricity just from a glance, that had believed for one reckless moment that love could rewrite the rules of power. By dawn, she made her choice. She packed lightly, just her coat, her phone, and that single folded letter. The city was calling again, but this time not for her empire. It was calling her home. Not to her penthouse. To him. Somewhere out there, Adrian was still getting there. And she finally understood maybe he wasn't chasing success or redemption or even her forgiveness. Maybe he was chasing love the way only a man who has lost everything else can. And maybe she was ready to meet him halfway. The car engine started, soft against the quiet morning. The road stretched before her, wet with dew, endless with possibility. Elena looked into the rearview mirror one last time at the reflection of the woman she used to be. Then she smiled. She can stay there, she whispered. I'm not her anymore. The wind caught her hair as she drove toward the sunrise. The world blurring around her, all that mattered was the feeling building in her chest. Hope, fire, and the unshakable belief that somewhere beyond the city lights he was waiting. The city was half asleep when Elena returned, the kind of dawn where fog curls around streetlights like secrets refusing to fade. She parked her car, stepped out, and for a moment, didn't know where to go. Everything felt different now. The same skyline, the same streets, but she had changed. Something inside her had been rewired by absence, by longing, by the quiet ache of missing someone she'd once pushed away. Then she saw it. The old art gallery on Fifth, the one he used to talk about rebuilding someday. The sign outside read, "Grand reopening today." Her heart stuttered. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and memories. Soft jazz floated through the space, mingling with murmured conversations and the scent of lilies. Elena walked slowly, her heels barely making a sound. Each painting she passed told a story of ruin, of rebuilding, of quiet devotion that refused to die, and then she saw it. A canvas unlike the rest, raw, unframed, pulsing with emotion, brushstrokes wild and deliberate, painted in colors that seemed to breathe. At the bottom corner, his signature, A. Cole. Her chest tightened. The painting showed a woman standing in the rain, eyes closed, hands open as if surrendering everything she'd once held tight. It wasn't just art. It was her. Elena, his voice. Low, steady, the same tone that once made her walls crumble without her permission. She turned. And there he was, standing a few feet away, hair a little longer, eyes darker than she remembered. He looked older but not broken, stronger, grounded, like a man who had wrestled his ghosts and survived them. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Only the soft hum of music and the electric silence between them. Then she whispered, "You built this." He nodded once. "For her?" She swallowed hard. "Who's her?" His eyes never left hers. "You already know." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, inescapable. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "You shouldn't have waited." He took a step closer. "I didn't wait," he said softly. "I lived, I healed, but I never stopped remembering." She felt it then, that pull. That dangerous gravity that once made her lose herself in him. Every nerve, every thought, every heartbeat screamed that she should walk away. But her body leaned forward as if it had its own memory. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, but it burned through her like lightning. His hand lingered a moment too long, and in that silence the world narrowed to just them. No titles, no power, no audience. Only two people who had once broken each other, and somehow still belonged to the same unfinished sentence. "Elena," he murmured, his voice barely more than a breath. "Tell me this isn't still there." Her eyes glistened. "I've tried to bury it." "And?" She exhaled shakily. "It keeps coming back." He smiled faintly, not pride, not victory, just recognition. "Then maybe it's not meant to die." Their gazes locked. The air between them thickened, vibrating with unsaid apologies and memories that refused to fade. It wasn't lust. It wasn't nostalgia. It was something deeper, a pulse that lived beneath skin and reason. She stepped closer, her perfume wrapping around them both like a secret. He didn't move back. Every inch that vanished between them felt like a decade folding in reverse, all the distance, all the silence, all the pretending undone by one shared breath. "I don't know how to start over," she whispered. "Don't," he said, "just start here." His words landed like a promise, not of forever, but of now. The music shifted, slower, softer, as if even the air understood what was happening. Elena's hand found his chest, resting just above his heartbeat. It was steady, real, familiar. His hand slid to her waist, barely touching, like a question she hadn't yet answered. And then she did. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was an answer louder than words, an admission wrapped in trembling breath and unguarded eyes. The moment stretched fragile, infinite. Every look was a confession. Every breath a memory resurfacing. He leaned in, not to claim her, but to listen. To the space between them. To the sound of something finding its rhythm again after years of discord. Her hand rose, tracing the line of his jaw, slow, reverent. Her fingertips trembled like they were remembering him, one touch at a time. He caught her wrist gently, eyes flickering with emotion. "You have no idea what it took not to come find you." Her voice was a whisper. "You should have." "I wanted you to choose," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Not out of guilt, out of want. She smiled faintly, tears glimmering. Then listen closely, I'm choosing now. The lights around them dimmed as the gallery doors closed for the night, but neither noticed. The world had fallen away, leaving only two silhouettes tangled in a moment too delicate to touch, too deep to explain. Forgiveness didn't need words. It lived in the tremor of her breath against his shoulder, in the way his hand steadied her when she faltered. Fire didn't always burn to destroy. Sometimes it burned to remind you that you're still alive. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, rhythmic, familiar. The kind that once started everything. He looked at her, rainlight reflecting in his eyes. You always did look beautiful in storms. She laughed quietly, the sound fragile and free. And you always find me in them. That night, in the stillness of the gallery, they stood surrounded by everything they'd been: ambition, lost, desire, forgiveness. Two stories rewritten by time and courage. Two souls that had run their separate races only to meet again at the same finish line. Desire met destiny that night. And neither of them ran from it. The gallery was silent long after the last light flickered out. Rain traced silver paths down the glass windows, the sound soft as a heartbeat. Elena stood there still, breathless, as if afraid that one wrong move would shatter the fragile peace they'd found. Adrian was beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth even through the cool air between them. Neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was thick, a silence filled with years of things unsaid. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't look at me like that." He tilted his head, eyes unreadable. "Like what?" "Like I'm still the woman you fell for." He smiled faintly. "You're not." Her breath hitched. "You're more now," he said quietly. "But you keep punishing yourself for it." She turned away, walking toward one of the paintings, the one that mirrored her reflection through a blur of color. Her voice trembled. "Do you know what power feels like, Adrian? It's not freedom, it's a prison with velvet walls. You can't scream in it, and no one knows you're suffocating." He took a slow step forward. "And yet you built that prison yourself." She closed her eyes. Her lips parted, not to argue, but because the truth hurt. "I told myself I wanted control," she murmured, voice breaking. "That if I could control everything, the company, the board, my image, I'd never feel small again. Never feel owned." She turned to face him, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "But that wasn't true. I wasn't afraid of losing control, Adrian. I was afraid of what would happen if I let it go." He studied her every word, every breath, every crack in her armor. "Elena," he said softly, walking closer. "Control isn't power. It's fear wearing perfume." Her chest rose sharply. He continued, his voice low, steady, dangerous in its honesty. "You don't need to be untouchable to be strong. You don't need to command to be respected. You just have to feel. And you've been denying yourself that for too long." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time the woman who built an empire looked small, not weak, human. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "When I lost you, I told myself it was the cost of ambition. That love was a luxury I couldn't afford. But every success after that felt empty, like I was decorating an empty house and pretending it was a home." He didn't interrupt. He let her speak, every word a release, every breath a confession, years in the making. "I thought if I kept my walls high I could stay safe," she went on, her voice barely holding. "But all I did was lock myself away from the one thing that made me alive." Her throat tightened. "You." Adrian stepped forward until they were close enough that she could see her reflection in his eyes. Rain light shimmered across his face, calm, patient, unyielding. He reached for her hand, not to claim it, but to steady it. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a simple, grounding touch. "You think love is about control," he murmured. "But it's the opposite. Love is the moment you stop fighting gravity and finally fall." Her pulse raced. "Falling terrifies me." He smiled, faint but knowing. "That's how you know it's real." Something in her broke then, quietly, like glass underfoot. Her shoulders slumped, her breath caught. For so long she'd been the woman who never cracked, never confessed. But standing in front of him, under the quiet hum of rain and regret, she couldn't hold it anymore. Tears slipped down her cheek. Not graceful ones, real ones. The kind that burned on the way down. "I loved you in all the wrong ways," she whispered. "I tried to possess what I should have protected. I tried to win when all I needed to do was stay." He reached up, catching a tear with his thumb. "You're allowed to be human, Elena. Even gods need to rest." Her laugh came out soft, trembling, wet with emotion. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," he said. "It's just not easy. She looked at the man who had every reason to walk away but hadn't, at the eyes that still saw her, not her headlines, not her crown. And in that moment the walls she'd built for years, stone by stone, began to crumble. The storm outside deepened. Thunder rolled, echoing through the glass as if the world itself were listening. She stepped closer until the air between them was thin enough to taste. Her voice was barely audible. "What if I don't know how to stop fighting?" His reply was a whisper. "Then let me show you how to surrender." The words weren't about defeat, they were about release, about the kind of surrender that doesn't weaken but frees. Her hand rose to his chest again, finding the same steady heartbeat she once tried to forget. Her fingers trembled, but they didn't pull back. Every breath between them felt charged, magnetic, a current neither could resist. Not need, not lust, recognition. He didn't move closer. He just stood there, letting her decide. And she did. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. It wasn't a kiss. It was a confession wrapped in silence. Her breath hitched as she whispered, "I don't want control anymore, Adrian, I just want you." His voice broke against hers. "Then stop running." Her lips parted, trembling, hesitant, and before words could ruin it, she closed the distance between them. The kiss wasn't desperate this time. It was slow, deliberate, a promise rewritten through touch. Her hands, once symbols of command, now trembled against his jaw. His fingers found the back of her neck, grounding her, not claiming, just reminding her that she was here. It wasn't about passion anymore. It was about truth. Every movement whispered what words never could. "You are seen, you are forgiven, you are free." When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. Not from the kiss, but from the weight it lifted. She exhaled, eyes glistening. "I never thought I could feel safe without being in charge." He smiled softly. "Maybe safety isn't about control. Maybe it's about trust." She nodded slowly, like the words were sinking deep, rewriting everything she once believed. As dawn began to bleed into the city, Elena stood by the window, the skyline reflecting against her bare soul. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper to herself. "For the first time, I don't know what comes next." Adrian came up behind her, his presence steady, his tone low. "That's the beauty of it," he said. "Now you finally get to live." Outside, the storm was ending. But inside, the kind of storm that changes everything had only just begun. The world outside was quiet, too quiet for a city that never slept. But in Elena's penthouse, silence felt sacred, the kind that hummed with all the words they couldn't say. The rain from last night had dried, leaving the windows fogged with the memory of storms past. She stood there barefoot, wrapped in nothing but morning light, staring out at the skyline that had once defined her. Now it felt smaller. Behind her, she heard Adrian's soft steps. No suit, no armor, just him. The same man who'd walked into her. Life on a rainy night and rewritten everything she thought she knew about power, control, and love. He stopped beside her, close enough that his presence brushed against her skin like a familiar melody. Neither spoke at first, they didn't need to. There was something in the air between them, a pulse, a rhythm, something that had always been there but now moved freely, unrestrained. Elena turned to him slowly. For the first time, she didn't look like the billionaire. She looked like the woman beneath it, raw, real, radiant. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Adrian, if I lose everything for this, would it still be worth it?" He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, the kind of smile that steadied her heartbeat and unmade her walls. "Elena," he said quietly, "you're not losing anything. You're finally choosing." Her breath trembled. He always had a way of saying the right thing, not to fix her, but to remind her she didn't need fixing. The air thickened, not from tension, but from release. The kind of stillness that only comes when both people finally stop pretending. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch wasn't rushed. It wasn't claiming. It was reverent, a silent promise that she was seen, wholly and without condition. Her eyes fluttered shut for a heartbeat, and she leaned into that touch. "You never treated me like the world did," she murmured. "You never wanted my empire." Adrian's hand stilled. "I only wanted the woman who built it." Her throat tightened, and a tear slipped free, but this one didn't burn. It felt like release. They moved through the room as if drawn by an unseen current, slow, deliberate, every step guided by memory and feeling. The same bedroom where everything had begun, where power had blurred with emotion, and confusion with desire. Only this time there was no confusion, only clarity. Elena stopped near the edge of the bed, the same bed that once felt like a battlefield. Now it felt like a place of surrender. She turned to face him, voice soft but steady.
Do you remember what I said that night?
His lips curved slightly. Which night? The one where you made me see myself. He smiled faintly. You mean the night you finally let yourself be seen? She took a deep breath, her heart in her throat. I said, please don't stop, you're getting there. Her voice trembled softer now, but filled with meaning. I didn't know what I meant then. I thought it was about touch, but it wasn't. Adrian's gaze held hers firm, grounded, patient. Her voice broke, beautiful and brave. I meant my heart, you were getting there, to the place no one else ever reached. The words hung in the air, raw and electric. Adrian stepped closer until the space between them was almost gone. His hand brushed her cheek, his thumb catching the edge of a tear. Elena, he whispered, you think you needed me to find yourself, but you just needed someone who didn't flinch when you did. Her chest rose, shaky. Then stay, don't flinch now. I won't, he said softly. And with that, she leaned forward, slow, deliberate, until her forehead met his. The contact was quiet, yet the feeling behind it was thunder. They stood there for what felt like forever, breathing each other in. It wasn't hunger this time, it was knowing. Every glance, every heartbeat, every breath felt like a vow whispered through the air. She exhaled, her voice barely a sound. Please don't stop. He smiled against her hair, murmuring, I'm not this time. And as they stayed there, her heartbeat pressed to his, her breath tangled with his name. The world outside melted away. No boardrooms, no rumors, no guilt. Just them. Two people stripped of their armor, meeting not as billionaire and worker but as equals. As souls that had spent too long fighting what was meant to be. The room filled with the quiet rhythm of something new. Not the chaos of passion, but the calm that follows after it's been understood. It was peace that burned softly. Love that breathed instead of demanded. Elena felt it deep in her chest, the warmth, the freedom, the final unraveling of everything she'd ever feared. She smiled faintly, whispering, You're still getting there. He looked at her, eyes full of light. Then I'll never stop. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware that somewhere high above it, two people had rewritten what power meant. And for once, the night didn't feel lonely. It felt infinite. Power built her world, but love gave it meaning. She learned that control doesn't make you strong, surrender does. Because real love doesn't stop when it's tested. It grows, it deepens, it finds you in the quiet and whispers. Please don't stop, you're getting there. If this story has your heart racing, drop it in the comments and tell me which moment had you holding your breath. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story that will make you feel, imagine, and fall in love all over again. And if you want more twists, passion, and heart-stopping drama like this, stay tuned. The next episode is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss it.